Welcome to the Gut Show. I'm Erin Judge, registered dietitian and founder of Gut Ovate, and I will be your host. My goal on this side of the internet is to empower those with IBS and digestive disorders to understand their guts better, to have a healthier relationship with their bodies, and make confident choices to improve their digestive health. During this season of the Gut Show, you can expect a weekly conversation covering a hot topic related to health, digestion, and IBS. As a disclaimer, I am a dietitian, but I'm not your personal dietitian. Everything we cover in this episode is meant to be educational and not a substitute for personalized care from your healthcare team. Before we dive into today's episode, let's hear a word from our sponsor. Are you missing out on your favorite foods because of your digestion troubles? FODzyme may be able to help. FODzyme is an enzyme blend that targets FODMAPs, which are gas-causing carbohydrates and common triggers of symptoms. Mixing the FODzyme powder with your food allows the enzymes to integrate and break down the FODMAPs lactose, GOS, and fructan before they can affect your gut. So say goodbye to digestion drama and hello to food freedom with FODzyme. Learn more at fodzyme.com and use the code GUTSHOW at checkout to save 20% off any single order. Welcome to the final episode of this season of the Gut Show. We are closing down this season by breaking down a few gut health myths that I see out there all the time that it's time to combat. So if you're excited to talk about maybe the nuance of some of these things that you may be seeing online too, welcome to the conversation. At the end, I would love to hear your thoughts. One of the most beautiful things around health recommendations that are out there, and even the nuance of science, like it's rarely black and white, right? The nuance really brings into perspective new emerging data, personal histories, and what you've experienced yourself. And so I would love for you to share that through our Facebook channel, through all the social media channels, wherever you feel comfortable sharing. All of that information is linked in show notes. So if anything pops up that you're interested in, please share, because I'm excited to have the conversation with you. So the first myth that we're going to talk about is the need for a fully plant-based diet when it comes to symptom management and also gut health overall. I see this recommendation popping up all the time because it's actually backed up from decent research. So this comes from the research that shows that a high-fat diet or a standard American diet has been shown to have worse outcomes for gut health, including makeup of the gut microbiome, certain metabolic effects. We see a rise in liver dysfunction, high cholesterol levels, issues with things like bile and even fat malabsorption or breakdown. And so we do tend to see worsened gut health in cases of a high fat diet or a standard American diet, which is highly processed foods and a really high intake of saturated and trans fats linked to highly processed foods. Because of this, there's been a lot more research on the opposite, which is a plant-based diet that is rich in polyphenols, that's rich in healthy fats, that's rich in fiber. And what they found is that there are more benefits to a plant-rich diet. So what people have done is they've taken this data and they've extrapolated it to mean that you have to be fully vegan or whole foods plant-based. Now, is there anything wrong with having a whole foods plant-based diet? No. Is there going to be benefit to having a whole foods plant-based diet? Probably. Most likely, yes. Do you have to in order to have symptom relief and to have better gut health? No. Research supports adding more plants in and reducing animal products, as well, especially saturated fats, and reducing highly processed foods, which can include trans fats and other things. But it does not show that a plant-only diet is required and that you have to be a vegan to achieve these results. What's actually true is that the most well-studied diet in all areas of health, including digestive health in terms of the benefits, right? The most beneficial, effective diet that we have out there is what we refer to as the Mediterranean diet, or the Mediterranean diet pattern, which includes a variety of plants, fish, healthy fats from things like fish and olive oils, and minimal animals, but still present. And the goal is balance and consistency and sustainability over time. This diet has the most research backing it up. So if you want to follow the research and pick, a pattern to really stick with, the Mediterranean diet pattern is the way to go. Now, you can achieve this diet pattern and these goals through a plant-based diet, a vegan diet, again, a whole foods plant-based diet, but you do not have to go to those extremes to get there. And so it's important to recognize that. There are valuable nutrients in animal foods that can be helpful and supportive for health, including your gut health. And so there is nothing wrong with incorporating these foods in where they may fit for you. I am a pescatarian myself, so I like to communicate this as this isn't just my own bias, like this is what I've chosen for myself. The reason I'm a pescatarian at the end of the day is that I do not like animal products. I really just don't. It's not something that I'm drawn towards. I never have been drawn towards them, so I don't really eat them, but that's me. And it's unfair as a practitioner for me to bring in my personal bias outside of the science, right? And so my recommendation is to find what meets your personal needs and your preferences, your culture, your background, all of those things based and rooted in science, not based and rooted only in my experience. When I see people recommending a vegan diet or whole foods plant-based diet as the sole answer for gut health or again, combating symptoms, this is often tied to their personal experience and is usually a sign of lack of experience in the field as a practitioner. So really take that in as you're listening to recommendations. Yes, read the science. There is good science behind that, but look at also what might not be being shared, right? What the science they may be sharing may be right and great, but there also may be other science that's stronger, again, like what we see with the Mediterranean diet that you want to follow, but also really look at, okay, is this just their personal experience? And is that why they're recommending this? And take all of that into account to make your decision, because you may see that and say, well, that's what I want. The background is similar. I'm going to try this. Great. You should be empowered by all of the information to make that choice for yourself. Now, in this, I'm going to go a little bit deeper outside of just gut health. We often see this recommendation the strongest, and I see this as a trend right now with practitioners for constipation. So the thought is that saturated fats, any saturated fats from any animal products, including dairy, eggs, and meat, can slow your digestive tract. So you should eliminate all saturated fats in order to have healthy motility. What they're referring to right there is called the ileocecal break. This is actually true. Whenever you eat a large amount of fat, especially saturated fats, your small intestine needs more time to break those fats down and take what it needs from them, like breaking them down into the smallest lipids, the small chains of the fats in order to absorb them, use them, whatever we need from them. And so what it does, whenever a lot of fat enters your small intestine, this ileocecal valve that connects the small intestine to the large intestine, it kind of stops. So it creates a break, like putting your foot on the brake in your car, right? A brake. And this slows digestion in the small intestine in order to accommodate that extra time and then move things to the large intestine. If you're eating a very large amount of saturated fats and that's all you're really eating day after day and not implementing other strategies, you may notice slow motility. So yes, decreasing these foods might allow you to have better motility. But again, this does not mean that you can't have these at all, right? The extremes are rarely needed. And even in my practice, I don't see that being needed all of the time. And so while you may be hearing these big statements of you have to eliminate dairy and eggs and meat from your diet completely for constipation, let's start a little bit slower than that of like what happens if we replace some of our meat, right? What happens if we just decrease the portion sizes here? What happens if we are just aware of overall fat content and spread it out throughout the day instead of having it in large amounts in every meal? If we decrease things like fried foods and more processed foods that have added fats to them. What if we just decrease to start and then slowly decrease a little at a time to find that right amount for you versus go to the extremes that may not be sustainable for you or allow flexibility? This also creates a lot of confusion because if you don't know where your tolerance level lies, then you're kind of on just one end or the other of the spectrum. And when things do need to be more flexible, like with travel or holidays or whatever it may be, then you feel lost and confused and you don't know what to do, right? We don't want to go to those extremes. We want to go to understanding what's happening and then testing it out in your own body. That is the key to relief with any dietary strategy, but especially when it comes to modifying fats and modifying animals versus plants for constipation specifically. That is myth number one. Myth number two is that more fiber is always better. And this kind of goes along with this plant-based craze. But since the research around fiber has come out, especially the Gut Microbiome Project that showed, the American Gut Project, that showed that 30 different plant foods per week increased diversity of gut microbes and diversity in the microbiome. It also showed that, fiber helped feed gut bacteria and was a marker of gut health. There's been this huge push for more fiber, more fiber, more fiber, more fiber. And there are people recommending that you get up to 50, 60, even more grams of fiber every single day. This is not always true. There's so much more nuance to this, and I think you might expect personalization that is needed. So what is fiber? Fiber is the non-digestible part of plants that feeds gut microbes. It also helps add bulk and form to your stool to help it move properly through your digestive tract. It is necessary for gut health. You cannot eat a completely low fiber diet long term and have healthy gut markers. That doesn't exist. Fiber is needed for a healthy gut environment, including gut bacteria, the makeup of them, so your gut microbiome, but also your gut lining, your immune system. Everything needs fiber because of its role in feeding those beneficial gut microbes. Fiber does help with your gut motility and better bowel movements through forming stool, but also kind of creating a bit of irritation in some cases to the gut lining and making those muscles really move through or move things along. And so it is needed for gut motility, which is why it is often recommended for constipation. For those with diarrhea, it is needed to help bring some bulk and form to the stool, absorb some of that extra water, and help you pass more solid formed stool. So fiber is a really important part. I am very pro fiber. I love fiber. I use it all the time with my patients. I recommend it all the time, but there is a limit. There are a few cases where that limit is the most important. First off, if you are constipated, fiber is not the treatment. If you add more fiber to a system that is not emptying and that is already backed up and full of poop, you are going to create more of a traffic jam because it's going to build up, it's going to expand, it's creating even more poop that's going to get more and more backed up, and you will have a traffic jam, which will feel really uncomfortable. You may have more bloating, more gas, more pain, and again, more constipation. Fiber is not a treatment. So it's important that we don't just add more fiber, add more fiber, add more fiber, but we also watch how you're clearing that fiber. We improve emptying of stool, softening of stool, whatever we need to based on your history and your symptom pattern in order to reduce that traffic jam that can happen. Fiber can also overbulk your stool, so not even just causing a traffic jam, but causing little backups through your whole intestinal tract, and that can cause more gas and more backup of that gas, which trapped gas, especially for those with irritable bowel syndrome or other GI conditions where we have hypersensitivity, trapped gas can be extremely painful and extremely uncomfortable. Not only that, but fiber will create more gas. Fiber is fermented by gut microbes, and we do get incredible byproducts from that fermentation, like short-chain fatty acids, including butyrate, which has been well researched. We also get gas. The more fiber you eat, the more gas you are going to produce. For some people, this may not be a big deal, and you can handle that. For others, this may lead to more bloating, more discomfort, and even passing gas all day, which can be really uncomfortable and frustrating. Fiber also will create more poop. I find it really interesting whenever people were recommending more and more and more fiber. Again, we see this lined up a lot with people who are recommending a vegan diet or a whole foods plant-based diet, and they, use this marker of, see, you were so backed up because now you are pooping so much more. You have a larger volume of poop coming out, or you're pooping, 2 to 3 times a day versus once a day. And you may not really notice, like, well, do you actually feel better? Or like it's kind of like this placebo effect of like, well, I guess I'm pooping more. Maybe I do feel better. You're pooping more because you're eating more fiber. Fiber adds that bulk to the stool, right? It's part of stool itself. And so the more fiber that you eat, the more stool that you are releasing. For those who have a diarrhea background or have urgency or difficulty passing stool, if you create more stool, this is going to be more challenging for you. It may actually work against you, which we do not want. So while fiber is a super important piece of a healthy diet, it is very important when it comes to gut health, it's not the full picture, and there needs to be a focus on balance of fiber with other like macro and micronutrients, with other lifestyle behaviors and changes. The goal is to find your personal tolerance. I find that the recommendations in the dietary guidelines for Americans are actually really great. They're backed by research of what we see works well for people. For men, that's around like 30 to 45-ish, 30 to 40 grams. For women, it's around like 25 to 30 grams. I find that those with irritable bowel syndrome on the constipation side tend to do really well with that 25 to 30 gram recommendation. Some of my clients have been able to go up to like 35 grams and feel really great. I've had some clients have to go down, and that's where they feel their best. For those with diarrhea predominant IBS, I tend to see 20 to 25 grams being that sweet spot. Sometimes, again, a little bit lower. For some clients, they're able to go up much higher, just depending on their trigger load as a whole and what else is going on. How you get there is that you assess your fiber consistency. So first aim at, okay, am I spreading fibers out? Am I being consistent in the number range that I'm working towards? And then look at your symptoms as a whole. Don't just say, okay, I need more fiber. I need more fiber. I need more fiber. But ignore how you're actually feeling, right? Are you pooping better? Are you feeling less bloated? Do you have energy? Do you feel more confident? Like, are you noticing improvement in how you feel? And if you're up at 40, 50 grams of fiber and you don't feel great, try decreasing your fiber. You may feel better, and that is okay. More is not better. You are not more superior. You're not going to necessarily live longer just because you were outpacing everyone else in your fiber intake. There's so much more to the health puzzle than that. So that's your permission to not push yourself to eat more and more and more fiber all the time. Now, if you are at that 10 grams or lower, the average American eats about 10 to 15 grams of fiber per day. That is likely too low. So we do want to work on that. And it is possible to build up your tolerance to fiber over time, but just boosting it and pushing it hard is not the way to get there. We have to look at the whole picture of your digestive health, your digestive wellness, and even your motility to make sure we're doing that in the right way. And then the third myth that we are going to break down, which is probably the most controversial right now, is that everyone has a parasite to kill. This is not true, according to the research that we have available and experts in this field. So what are parasites? These are microscopic pathogens, typically worms, I guess could be a part of it, that can infect your body. So you become exposed to them, and they will then wreak havoc on your body. So they will typically have this systemic effect that impacts not only your digestive system, but also your immune system. They might impact metabolism and absorption. They can impact different parts of your system as a whole. They can even make their way into your body, into other areas, and then cause issues there. Parasites are very real. They are real. They do happen. I had a parasite as a kid, had a Giardia infection, which led to my IBS. They are very real. The prevalence of parasites is around 30% worldwide. The majority of these are seen in developing countries, but you can get them anywhere. There is a bit of a myth in this myth, and a lot of people who are trying to combat the myth that you need to treat parasites like everybody does, they typically will say, well, if you live in the US, there's no chance you have a parasite. That is not true either. I had a parasite living in the US. Like, it is very common to see it, right? It happens. but it's less common than what we're going to see in developing countries or other countries that maybe don't have access to as much like safe and clean water, right? Access issues are really strong here. And so you may pick up a parasite somewhere else, which we do see often, or it can show up anywhere. These are microscopic. They will not be found in stool. So simply just a stool test alone, you're not going to see them, right? You're not going to see them in your toilet. They are microscopic. There's a myth that you'll pass a worm and you treat things, and we'll talk about that in a minute. You're not going to see a parasite in your stool. They're smaller than that. So whenever you're doing a parasite and ova and parasites like stool test from your doctor, what they're doing is they're taking your poop and they're looking at it under a microscope. They're really looking for the parasites, the worms, whatever may be there in the stool through the microscope where they can see it. And then whenever parasites are present over time, so if you have had an exposure and you haven't just passed it on your own, if they've been present, they likely will not stay in the gut, like I mentioned before. They tend to have more of a systemic effect in the body, and so they're not likely to cause these kind of chronic intermittent symptoms. They're often going to get worse and worse and then start leading to other problems and other issues. So this is where that idea of like, well, everyone has a parasite. If you're dealing with these intermittent symptoms, like these digestive issues, like it's that you have parasites and you need to keep cleansing yourself of parasites, and then you've probably had them many, many years. And there's a lot of misinformation out there around that. Whereas we know that if you've had a parasite and it's continued to kind of start moving its way through your body and it's not leaving, it's going to have major impacts on your health as a whole, not just your digestive system. So where do you get parasites? What causes them? Are FODMAP troubles keeping you from enjoying your favorite foods? Our sponsor, FODzyme, helps you add these foods back to your plate. When sprinkled on or mixed with high FODMAP meals, FODzyme's enzyme blend breaks down the FODMAPs, GOS, lactose, and fructan into more easily digested carbohydrates, so you can enjoy your meal without the worry. I have personally used FODzyme all over the world, from Paris to New York City to my local city of Nashville. This has helped me eat with more confidence, knowing I have support for my biggest triggers of dairy, onions, garlic, and beans. It's possible for you to enjoy food and eating out again without the worry of digestive discomfort, and FODzyme can help. Learn more at fodzyme.com and use the code GUTSHOW for 20% off any single order. If there's an area with known parasites, you may get them there. So that's an obvious one. Whenever you are traveling, you can check, and see. The Centers for Disease Control may have some great information on this, but you can look and see, okay, what pathogens are common here? What do I need to look out for? The most often, area of contamination is going to be through contaminated water, food, soil, blood, or feces or poop. If you're not washing your hands properly after you go to the bathroom, there's a risk there. If your food handlers are not washing their hands properly before preparing your food, there may be an issue there. So that's what we see whenever I said developing countries. I know there's probably a better word for that right now, but in some countries, there's not as lot of access. There may also not be a lot of education on safe food handling processes. And so you may run into this in those areas because of that, right? And often it is linked to water. Another thing would be washing or bathing infrequently, yourself, especially washing your hands, having a weakened immune system, not being able to eliminate, these whenever they do come in, contaminated bug bites, that could possibly be a place. And so there's a few different areas of this. There's some belief that maybe having dogs or animals, if they're carrying something, they could pass it on. If you are, living with them, kissing them, really closely connected to them, there could be a place of contamination there. Now, where does the myth come in? Where does this information happen? Because you can hear me talk about all of this, and it is likely that you could come across a parasite infection in your life. Again, I did myself, so I know that this can happen. But many who are online, and where this myth has really hit and made itself a true myth, or where the misinformation has gotten out of control, is that many online claim that all GI symptoms are due to parasites, and that a parasite cleanse is needed to rid you of the symptoms, and that you should continue to do these repeat cleanses every so often. So some people are recommending you do them multiple times a year, you do them every year. And the companies that are selling these parasite cleanses are not sharing information on safety and validation, and they are happy to take your money over and over again as you continue to cleanse. The problem is that these protocols are not harmless. They are there to kill for a reason, right? They are in place to kill this parasite that you may have. And oftentimes they are very robust in terms of their formulation because they're trying to kill everything. So they are going to impact your body whether you have parasites or not. So doing repeat cleanses in these protocols or doing them when you don't need them could pose other risk. And what I often see in my practice when I'm working with a client who's been through years of this kind of stuff, whether it was led by practitioners or not, is that they usually end up in a much worse place than where they started after repeat killing protocol, killing protocol, killing protocol. And now they're actually having some systemic issues. Now they're actually not digesting food well. They're having more food intolerances. Now they have micronutrient deficiencies. There's all these issues that are coming up that they didn't even start with that are likely related, even kidney dysfunction, liver dysfunction, that are related to the protocol itself and the repeat protocol use versus the potential parasite or whatever it was at the very beginning. And so we have to almost do a lot of damage control in order to get them to the baseline of where they were to then figure out what was going on to start with. So it's really important. So whenever you are thinking about this yourself, I can't tell you if you have a parasite or not. I can't tell you if, 5 years from now, we'll see possibly new parasites that we are more commonly infected with. I can't tell you that because science does change, and I know there are anecdotal results of this working for people, and I don't want to invalidate that or be so naive or on one stage that I refuse to bend on. Like, that's not what a scientist or a health practitioner does. We understand that things can change over time, and I recognize that. What I do want to say is that it's important to be a wise consumer and to be conscious of poor marketing and misinformation. So if you have taken a test or someone's recommending a test that shows that you have parasites, first check, is this test actually validated and proven to be true? Like, who's really behind this? And is the only person that's behind this test telling you that it's validated and that it works the person making money off of it, right? Do they have any studies? What are they comparing it against, to see that it's actually true? And if you were to repeat this test from that person, like whoever you bought it from, will the same results come back? Because that's important. Also, if you were to repeat, let's say you got a test that said you had parasites, and then you go to your doctor and you do a parasite test there as well properly, does that line up? And if it doesn't, that's a red flag. Does your history line up with possible parasitic infection? That's really important to think about. You may not know for sure, but it's important to think about, like, is this plausible? Is this likely? And if you're just dealing with bloating or, some constipation, some diarrhea, and it hasn't necessarily gotten worse after a possible infection, like if you kind of dealt with it off and on your whole life, you haven't done anything else like changing your diet or looking at like lifestyle behaviors, like there's nothing else that you've done, I would start there instead of taking the risk of losing money, but also creating more harm in your body with a protocol. And is the treatment that you are moving forward with, this protocol that you're going to do, is this evidence-based and has it been shown to be safe? And if they can't prove that it's safe, I would definitely test if it's a supplement protocol. Has this been third-party tested? Do you know that what they say is in it is actually in it? Because while these things are not harmless, they are also not regulated in the United States, at least. So we do not know that what they say you're getting is what you're actually getting. So I would look up safety of all of those ingredients and the doses that they're used. I would ask, okay, is there any science or evidence behind you actually using these ingredients in these doses for this problem? Like, how can you prove that this is evidence-based as a treatment as a whole? And then, are you third-party tested, that I can actually trust that now that I've done this research, right, that this is what it says it is, that could be safe for me and effective for me? And then if you do treat it, do your symptoms go away? If you need repeat, like it is not likely unless you are being continually exposed to unclean or contaminated water, food, or stool, which again, if you're having these repeat exposures, there's a problem, especially if you live in an area that has access to clean water and like food safety practices in place, right? Maybe we need to change that first. But if you're likely not being exposed over and over and over again, but you are being recommended to do treatment over and over and over again, and the answer after one treatment is to do another killing protocol and another treatment, that should raise a red flag that if your symptoms didn't go away, this probably was not legitimate, right? This was probably not where you want to go. And like just doing the test over and over again, expecting a different result is the definition of insanity, right? So we want to be mindful about that. And then what if the protocol that you're doing leads to these worms or something in your stool? Because this is what we see people sharing. They may even show you, like, look what I found in my poop. This is a worm. It looks like this white matter, right? And they'll say it's this long thing that was inside my body. Rarely this can happen. So again, not to invalidate 100%. What I will say is that many of these protocols include a lot of bulking agents and binders. Bulking agents are things like fibers, but they add bulk, and that bulk will sometimes look like different matter, right? So you may get these streams, you may get this kind of weird formation in your stool because it's being bulked. Binders will bind different things in the body, and this can include different dead cells that maybe would have come out in a different form, bile, things like that, that can look like these worms or these like stringy things and items that come out that normally wouldn't. So that does not always mean that something worked or that you passed the parasite. It may simply mean that what you are taking as a supplement has now created a form of matter from your body, right? And sometimes that may not be a good thing because we may be binding nutrients that we need and valuable parts of the digestive process. Again, things are not always harmless just because they're sold online, just because you can access them, and just because that person on social media is saying that they did it and they feel great. What often people are communicating is short-term relief, short-term benefits, short-term response. I want to see what they look like and what they act like and how they feel a year from now from that treatment and from that protocol, because if they're back to where they started, it likely did not do anything beyond maybe clear up some sort of bacteria that was present, or maybe even just get some stool out of them and give them some diarrhea so they felt less bloated, less constipated, and maybe felt good for a little bit, that you could have gotten through like a colonoscopy cleanse, right? So there's a lot of nuance to that. And being an investigator, kind of thinking beneath the marketing, going a little bit deeper into, okay, what are the specifics, will help you be a knowledgeable and safe consumer of the different products that are out there. Now, if you do have a parasite, there are really strong anti-parasitic medications that are highly effective and safe and can be used as a treatment from your doctor. So if you do think you have a parasite, ask your doctor for a true parasite test, and then back it up with your history, and they may utilize an anti-parasitic medication to help treat that. And that is the proper way to go. That is truly evidence-based at this moment in time. And again, if this has been your personal experience and you had a different experience, that is okay. What's important to think about is that your personal experience is valid, 100%. What worked for you, and that is worth celebrating. That does not mean that what worked for you is safe for everybody else, or will work for everybody else, or should be even recommended to everybody else. As practitioners, we are held to a higher standard in terms of liability because our licenses, our credentials really hinge on that. A lot of the people recommending things that could take me down as a dietitian and take away my credentials don't have credentials to take away. So they're doing it with a little bit more I don't know, less risk, I guess. But when you are making a health recommendation, including the recommendations of supplements, anything related to health, you carry the liability of that decision. And if someone were to have a bad response to it, they could technically come back to you making that recommendation. Again, this doesn't happen. I see it probably happening in the next 5 to 10 years on a legal side, but they may come back after you and hold you accountable and liable, even if you don't have a professional organization above you. It is still against the law. You are still carrying liability. So it's important to understand that whenever practitioners like myself are not necessarily recommending what worked for you, or might delete a comment that you made, or may come back and say, well, that's not actually evidence-based. Often what we're trying to do is protect the population as a whole, because that thing that worked for you, which did, and again, it should be celebrated that you feel better and that you got the help you needed, it may not be safe or effective for everyone else. And that is a piece of liability that's very important. In my practice, I've seen way too many people come in with eating disorders because of recommendations that were made, malnutrition because of recommendations that were made, kidney disease, liver dysfunction, all of these things that they could have prevented by knowing and understanding safety and risk with recommendations that were being made freely online from either people who had great intentions or companies that are making a ton of money off of them. And so that is, I think, if I could say anything, it is that. And I hope that that comes across with compassion, because I don't want you to feel like you are being pushed aside or not heard. Like it's protection for you too, and for us as practitioners, because there's so much nuance here, but also liability that's involved. And that brings me to, anything that we say online is not personal health advice, because we cannot make recommendations for you on a personal basis through social media or a video. And that is where working more one-to-one with a practitioner that you align with is so valuable. That's our team, but that may also be other practitioners with other perspectives, or maybe they approach things differently. Maybe they do back up some of these things that you say that you believe in and that you want to pursue. That's great. Find those practitioners that you trust and lean into that individualized guidance. And again, that accountability from them. And again, they're trusting their own liability. They're vetting that out themselves. Really lean into that over just getting random information online from influencers, from people on social media, or through ads that are geared towards just trying to make you purchase something. Thank you for tuning in this season. I wish we were kind of ending on a more happy, positive, lighthearted moment. We're not, but that's okay. But I hope you enjoyed this season as we kind of thought a little bit more outside of the box. We got into some interesting topics, some controversial, some not, some a little bit more fun. And I hope to see you in the next season in 2024. If you have any ideas of what you'd like to see, guests you'd like to see, please let us know. We're always interested in new ideas that we can bring you that will be valuable, because we know that you choosing to listen to this episode or anything that we put out there is the biggest compliment in the world. And so if we can make that a better experience for you, we always want to. So always let us know. But thank you again for tuning in this season, and I will see you in the next one. Do you want to keep learning from me in bite-sized pieces, as well as even be able to ask me questions and get those answered? If that is true, then you should follow me on social media so that you can learn from myself, but also my incredible team. You can find us on Instagram at erinjudge.rd or at Getivate. You can also find us at TikTok, same name. And then you can also find us, if you're not already on YouTube for longer and shorter videos than the one that you listened to today. And if you're someone who really does enjoy compiled information from different brands we trust and even recipes that we enjoy, then you can also follow us on Pinterest, where you can see our own boards, but also the boards that we have been able to compile other great IBS-friendly links and resources for you.